we've had the chance to enjoy Fastball and have the privilege of participating in the talkback about the film. So to get things started, I'd like to introduce Mike Tarr, who you saw in the film. Professor Tarr is the head of the Department of Psychology and studies the neural, cognitive, and computational mechanisms underlying visual perception and cognition. And I'm pretty sure he's a baseball fan too, right? So Professor Tarr, it's my honor to turn the microphone over to you to start the panel discussion.
Thank you very much. Our panel tonight, it's kind of fading in and out. Okay, thank you. Our panel tonight, we have Jonathan, of course, you all met, so we're going to come up here so we can take questions up here on the stage. We have Chris Johnson. It's not working right, sorry. I'm just going to talk, you can probably all hear me anyway. Chris Johnson is actually also a psychologist, but also happens to be the director of performance for the Pirates. So may have some insight on how you handle some of these things. And then where's Gregg? There's Gregg, who's our star physicist in it. And I should mention also that Tim Verstynen is on the West Coast this semester, so he's not here right now. And I was just going to mention Tim Versteinen's on the West Coast this semester, and Nathan Urban is now at the University of Pittsburgh, actually as vice provost, and couldn't be with us tonight. So I want to open it up to questions because you probably have a lot of questions to them, but I want to start with one of my own, and it's actually for Chris. What's the deal with Nolan Ryan? I mean, I'm not much older than him when he finished pitching, and it's like today, 100 pitches are out. So what's going on? What happened to people like him?
So, first of all, just an amazing job of capturing really the both the brilliance and the uniqueness of somebody like a Nolan Ryan in that film. So I think even for non-baseball fans, you're going to marvel at somebody's ability to perform at that level for 27 years. I mean, I'm 45 right now, and I know 5 years ago is when I started to feel like, your body is not the same anymore, and I can't imagine doing that. And so, how does somebody do that? I mean, in some respects, he won the genetic lottery, and in other respects, it's part of how he trained, and then there's the non-specific factors, the X factor, the mystery that everybody's after. I get asked a lot, what's the X factor? What do you guys look for when you assess? There isn't really an X factor. There's an A through Z factor. But he had a lot of it, so it doesn't help when you try and go out and find somebody like that, because I think they even made reference to it in the movie that he didn't even know how competitive he was, and that is difficult to get around. Those are latent constructs. As psychologists, that's what we do. We look for latent constructs. They're hard to measure, but we're trying to predict on an 18-year-old young man what he's going to be like for the next 20 years, and it is really difficult. So the short answer to your question is if we knew exactly what that was and how he was the way he was, we'd be picking out the guys who had it, and we'd be training everybody to it. So it's still a mystery.
Thank you. I forgot also, by the way, today is Jackie Robinson Day, actually, in the major leagues, and they're honoring Jackie throughout the entire major leagues. And Thomas Tull, the producer of this movie, also made another movie called 42, which is the story of Jackie Robinson's life, and he was nice enough to donate 25 copies of that movie. And if you look in your programs, you may have a 42 emblem in there. And if you have a 42 emblem in there, actually see someone in the back, that corner over there afterwards, and you can pick up a copy of the movie. So thank you to Thomas for that as well. So everyone's excited by that. So before we take a couple questions, I know, Jonathan, you've probably seen the movie innumerable times. Is there anything that strikes you new every time you see it or not?
Well, on the subject of Nolan Ryan, one thing that, if you watch the movie on iTunes, there's some some iTunes extras that are things that were on the cutting room floor, but were interesting, and we assembled them for extras. He tells the story in 1986. He had some soreness in his arm. He was 39. after the season, James Andrews, the famous surgeon, examined his arm and said, "Nolan, bad news, it's torn. You're gonna need surgery." And at that point, it was a year and a half before you could even think about coming back. So he said, "I'll be 41 years old. I'm not gonna have surgery." So he just went home, and he said he usually started throwing on December 15th. He said this year, because of the arm, he said, "Oh, I'm not gonna try it for a while." And so on January 15th, he went out to throw, and it felt fine. And he went to spring training and started pitching. He felt fine. And Dr. Andrews came through Astros camp, and he examined him, and he said, it healed. This is the first arm I've ever seen that healed itself. And it was like some kind of mystical experience. And then flash forward 7 years when his elbow pops, when he's pitching against the Mariners. And the next spring, his son was pitching at TCU. He was playing college ball for TCU, so Nolan was down hanging around, and he went to pitch batting practice one day. And his arm, he said, "My arm was fine. It felt fine." I said, "You could have come back." He said, I could have, and the owner of the Rangers called me. He said, "I hear you're pitching. Why don't you come back?" And I thought about it, and I said, if I can't give you 200 innings, I just wouldn't feel right taking your money. I could probably give you about 180 innings, but the getting my arm's fine. It's just getting the rest of my body ready to pitch every fifth day it was so hard the last year. He said that it was just everything he could do to get back on the mound, and he just couldn't go through that again if he didn't think he could make 200 innings. So just the mystery of Nolan Ryan sort of deepens. The more you know, the less it's sort of believable or sort of rational.
Gregg, is there anything you noticed or thought about since you last saw the film?
Well, we have, there are more fast pitches, right? But not reaching what Nolan Ryan did. But there's more data to look at. And so, in fact, I have more confidence in what those results look like.
So you're pretty confident on the 108?
I think I'm very confident in the ordering. I mean, what kind of, air you want to put around the 108. It might be half a mile per hour or something like that. Jonathan didn't want to show that part in the movie, but
yeah, we didn't want to say the give or take a mile.
It's not 3 miles per hour.
I just want to say it.
So I'd like to open it up for questions from people. Is there another mic to bring to? Okay, so back there, is there anyone who has some questions they'd like to ask the panel?
So I'm curious about the whole science thing. When a hitter actually hits a fastball going that fast, when are they making the decision to swing in their brain? Because we talked about the second, the milliseconds it takes to make the decision and actually swing. Because you do see hitters hitting fastballs that are very fast.
So I think both Chris and I would probably have something to say about this, but the rate at which you move your eyes is such that you probably get to look at the ball somewhere around the midpoint, depending on how fast the ball is moving. But really at that point, you're not going to get to see the ball again until it's really crossing the plate. Because when your eyes are moving, you're essentially blind. And so your eyes look at the ball, you're blind, and you have to have already decided to, and because also the time it takes to plan your swing and actually execute it takes a fair amount of time, it's probably in the first couple hundred milliseconds. At that point, you're committed entirely, which is what I suspect that's exactly why, I forget who it was that said they look like Bugs Bunny spinning around. They do embarrass themselves sometimes to go after pitches that are horrible pitches because they've already made a decision about where they think it's going to be. And if they get caught with a curveball or something, they're completely off. So, want to add to that?
Yeah, that is a fascinating thing to watch, and one of the things that has been most interesting to me is that I have a built-in lab at either end of the spectrum of being able to do this. I have an 11-year-old son who is a baseball fanatic, and then every day I'm with guys who are the best in the world at this, and so one of the things I remember is teaching the young kids, when you're in the batter's box and you're preparing, you need to be going up there thinking, I'm going to swing unless I see something that I don't like. So many of the young kids, when they see somebody throwing a ball at them, they get, there's a lot going on in the head, but so many of them, their first approach is, well, let me determine if it's something that I want to swing at or not. And by that time, even at that young age, by that time, if you're still determining whether or not you want to swing at it, it goes by too fast. And so you're developing these young eyes and these young brains and this psychomotor reaction at a young age to get up there and think, I've got to swing unless it's something that I don't want. And so every now and then with our big league manager, Clint Hurdle, I'll have conversations about the neuroscience of baseball. And one of my favorite quotes from Clint is that he'll say, look, all I know is that I can't think and hit at the same time. And so there's a very automatic reaction going on. The ability to inhibit that swing, some people are better at than others, but there's definitely something going on, pre-conscious levels. I mean, it's faster than awareness.
Well, I don't know too much about it, but for example, you guys didn't go too much into it. I guess it would have had another layer of complexity to get into just in delivery and the wind-up and, how people, I don't know, like for example, Camaneros throws very fast and then people seem to be able to hit him. So, you hear it's 100, but then guys are knocking all over the place, and then someone else, it's very different, right?
Well, so in addition to just being able to track it and hit it, when pitchers have any amount of deception, or whenever you can perhaps pick the ball up earlier in the pitch. So there are all these subtleties that are difficult to quantify. I think we'll get there at some point. The number of metrics that we're getting now is really impressive. I mean, at every Major League Baseball stadium now, we're getting a spin rate on every pitch. So it's fascinating. We're getting, we're getting movement of the ball in 3 dimensions. So in addition to just the speed, there's the movement of the ball, and then there's also the deception that the pitcher has before he throws. So, and then you add in stress, because these are not robots. These guys have emotions, and they have egos, and they have expectations, and you put all that together, and you've got a beautiful game of baseball.
I would say Rod Carew, I had a conversation with him about this issue, and he said that the pitchers that you can pick up the ball when it's still in their hand, and it makes sense if you think about what Mike and Tim were saying in the film about how many extra computations you get when when the ball's moving a little slower. It's really moving a lot slower in the pitcher's hand, right? And Rod Carew said, if I see it in his hand, and I know what kind of pitch it is based on the grip, because their vision is so amazing, that he said, I can hit it if it's 1,000 miles an hour if I see it early enough. And so to me, I think that deception begins in the windup. It's probably why Gossage was so successful, because...
I would just add that part of the reason Jake Arrieta is such a tough pitcher to hit is because every pitch looks the same. It looks like when it comes off his hand, it's impossible to tell what's coming. Is that true, Chris, for him?
Absolutely. Very, very difficult to tell what pitch he's going to throw.
Yeah. So they get a little more leverage because of how much they're hiding what's happening until the ball actually crosses the plate.
And I would think confidence, you said, so much of it is really the stress or lack of stress. And I think that if a batter thinks he's picking up the ball early, he's so much likelier to hit it, even if he's only picking it up a tiny bit earlier, maybe not even picking it up earlier, but he thinks he is. Like Clint Hurdle said, you can't think and hit, right? So if you relax because of your confidence, everything's just going to flow better, right?
Absolutely.
I have a question. At some point in the movie, there is this representation of people running faster and faster, while the pitching is not getting faster. There is an Olympic sport where people just throw a fixed weight, and they look at how far they throw it. I wonder if in that sport, people can throw it increasingly farther, and if there can be a comparison between the two to understand what makes this change in human performance in one case versus not being able to throw faster.
That's a great question, and we should look into that and see. I have a feeling that I guess the javelin is a throwing, but there's shot put is more brute force than speed. Anyway, it's a really interesting question.
It is interesting though that more and more pitchers throw hard in the major leagues than ever before. So the number of great pitchers we have now seems almost unprecedented at one time.
Yeah, I think it is. I think clearly there are more pitchers throwing at this maximum, but I've been asked this question so many times during the process of screening this film, and the analogy that I came up with was it's like the human lifespan. Like, ever since time immemorial, they say 120 years, someone correct me if I'm wrong, is the longest a person is going to live. And that's the same now as it was maybe 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago. But a lot more people are getting closer to that now than ever did before because of nutrition, because of all those other things. And now you see in Major League Baseball, there's still that limit that you can't throw faster than, but so many more people because of better mechanics and better, nutrition and workouts, and also because the nature of the game now caters to the throwing as fast as you can, because if you're starting, you're only going to throw 5 or 6 innings, you're going to throw 100 pitches, and then everybody who comes in from the bullpen is throwing 1 inning tops. And, so everybody has the opportunity to just let it go as hard as they can every time they come in. And that didn't used to be the case, because when a starter knew he had to throw 9 innings, he wasn't going to push it as hard as he could. He had to pick his spots. That's why when Ernie Banks was talking about Robin Roberts, when guys were on base, all of a sudden, it was really fast. Now guys are just, can throw it because they're not expected to stay in there. So I think it's a combination of all those factors, and either the game is following the trend or creating the trend. But it's certainly true that, there are hundreds of pitchers now throwing north of 95.
Right, I like your analogy of the human lifespan. Another analogy that I like to go to is Roger Bannister in the mile time. It was just accepted that no one can break the 4-minute mile, and nobody did for many, many years. And then as soon as Roger Bannister did it, the following year there were 12 other people who did it. And so this gets into the confidence piece and the art of what's possible, and just knowing that this can be done. And every year we have some new record being set in baseball, and so there are incremental changes in records being broken, but not on the grand scale as you see in other sports, for sure.
My question is, throughout the process of making this film, or otherwise, is there a player that stands out to you guys as someone I guess a favorite or a most memorable experience, someone specific that you met and talked to, and what was it about them?
Well, for me, talking to Hank Aaron and talking to Nolan Ryan were, for the batter and the pitcher, that was incredible. Sitting and talking about the fastball with Nolan Ryan for a couple hours in Texas was like, climbing the mountain in Tibet to seek truth from the guru at the top, and it just tells you all the truth. And like I felt I left the room like now I know it all. Because Nolan Ryan told me. The Bob Gibson interview, which was conducted by Mike Toland, who was one of the producers of the film, an amazing Academy Award nominated filmmaker. Bob Gibson was incredible. I mean, here's a guy who supposedly hates talking to the media and doesn't like doing these things, but you know, there was Thomas and the Hall of Fame behind it, and he said he would do it, and he was just, it was amazing how, you know, I love, I could watch that section, and again in the iTunes extras, there's even more stories he talks about going after guys, and you know, when he talks about respect, and some guy on the Mets, John Milner, swung so hard in a preseason game, an exhibition game, he swung so hard he fell, and he said, that is no respect. So next pitch, I got him. And then later that season, Tom Seaver threw one right over his head. And he said, I think to myself, why is Tom Seaver throwing at my head? And then I remembered, John Milner, spring training. Okay, that's fair. And there are like 4 or 5 more just great stories. So those are the 3, I would say. You know, Ryan and Aaron that I did, and Mike's interview with Bob Gibson are really my favorite. And meeting Steve Dalkowski was another really interesting experience. Another one with more in the iTunes extras, but the situation with him, in case you were curious, is he was diagnosed with what's called alcohol-induced dementia. And when he was found after 20 years of nobody knew where he was, he had become a migrant farm worker in California. He was picking, you know, peaches and oranges in the fields. And his sister finally found him after 20 years, and he couldn't even speak anymore. And he's had a lot of therapy, and he's doing better back home in Connecticut. But that was, I mean, talk about a mythical figure. And that was really cool to meet him. We had a great day together.
I wanted to get back to your lifespan analogy. So I like it. I like that a lot too. And you know, when you think of lifespan, if 120 is the maximum, then maybe it's because, I don't know, making stuff up, like the cells themselves are breaking down, mitochondrial problems. Like there's some mechanism that says that this is why, you know, 120 is the maximum. So is there some bottleneck that makes it so that humans can't pitch more than 105, 110? So, you know, something in the body that's preventing us from, you know, breaking that record?
Yeah, I think maybe Gregg can address this about, you know, moving something that shape, that size, that weight at a certain speed requires a certain amount of force, and I'm not sure if you can maybe explain that.
I can take a swing of what, so Nathan Urban should address it, who's not here as the biologist. Though I think that they would say that there are limits of just what our muscles and what our bones can do, and we're at the limit of what one can do safely, and maybe our body then, that's not an accident, that we're not capable of destroying ourselves. I don't know whether I believe that or not. I mean, because I don't know how that translates, so why can we run faster and throw further? So my answer is I don't know.
One last question.
In the making of this film, did you ever have any discussion? Thank you. In the making of this film, did you ever have any discussion about other sports that are not as structured as baseball? Something such as soccer, where your body is what you're hitting the ball with. You're either deciding, do I use my head, do I use my knee, do I use my foot, do I use whatever? Or handball, something like that. Baseball is predictable. Somebody's standing on a mound throwing that ball at you. You know what your reaction should be, swing and hit, ideally, but it's still a predictable outcome. Other sports where there is no predictability. Did you have any discussion about that?
Well, we weren't going to talk about any sport other than baseball. But I think what you're talking about really gets at the beauty of baseball in that it's predictable, but what's predictable is something that's been set up in such perfect balance that when you have the person at the one end performing at the limits of what a human can do, the only person who could possibly hit it is somebody at the other end performing at the very limit of what a human can do. And the other sports have their own fascinations in the randomness of and how people respond to a more random situation, and the creativity of a soccer player who can receive the ball from anywhere and take it anywhere. It's a whole other kind of fascination, but the drama in that fastball pitcher versus a great hitter within those fixed parameters, and still anything can happen, any pitch. That's why baseball, I think, is so amazing. I mean, it's better than the other sports, but that confined drama yielding infinite result is really fascinating.
It might be better than all other sports.
It might be.
Well, thank you all for coming, and thank you so much, panelists, for participating. Jonathan, thank you for being